We're in truly scary and unprecedented times. Hello, welcome to Dangerous Policy, a channel aimed at intelligent people wanting to discuss important issues facing life and society. My name is Crispin, and today I want to discuss the development in terms of tech censorship that I never believed that I would live to see, despite being one of the greatest doomsayers when it comes to this issue. Never in my wildest imaginations would I anticipate what Facebook has done. So Facebook has barred Donald Trump for the remainder of his term of office from having a Facebook account. That means that Facebook, a private company, but the largest social media platform on earth, has deplatformed, depersoned the sitting president of the United States, the head of the American Republic. And this indicates a number of things. Number one, that tech giants in Silicon Valley really have assumed for themselves a degree of personal power that outstrips even the leaders of the most powerful nations in the world. And they've done it in a absolutely overt and totally audacious way. I've never seen anything like it, never thought I would. And this has many implications. Number one, obviously, if they can do it to the president, they can do it to anyone. Nobody is safe from this level of censorship. And when I say this on YouTube, it just created a chilling emotional effect as a YouTube creator, one who discusses politics, discusses it in a moderate way. Like I'm certainly no extremist, I want to talk to the normies out there. But that doesn't matter. I mean, if YouTube decides that the content that we are discussing is too sensitive for their precious ears, then we will instantly be deleted from their platform with no repercussions, no recourse for justice, despite the hundreds, thousands of hours that we put into building up this community and this audience. And the content that you choose to consume by watching this channel are no longer available to you. Everything will be filtered through the algorithms as provided by these tech giants. And I remember Google's classic mission statement, incredibly famous when they first came out, and it was simply "Don't be evil." That was their catch cry. And for a while there, Google was the flagship of the promise of the internet. The internet, when it first came out, and for my sins, I'm old enough to kind of remember all this. It said, look, you have your own echo chambers, you have your own communities, your own perspectives, but with the internet, you'll be able to share through the marketplace of ideas a whole plethora of opinions, perspectives, value systems with everybody on Earth. And that interaction will create a degree of self-improvement because people will see where they've erred, they'll see where others are doing well, they'll be able to communicate their good ideas to a wider audience, and thus it'll bring everybody together. And I remember the ICQ program, that first ever almost social media, and what you would do is you would sit there, you would click a button, and it would randomly connect you with someone else somewhere on the internet, somewhere in the world. Now, this might seem a bit archaic now, but at the time, if you wanted to have like friends overseas, you would have like a pen pal. You would write to someone in Japan or Spain or whatever, and you would wait weeks and months to kind of communicate and find out what's going over there. Whereas now you could instantly connect with someone in some part of the world and just discuss what was going on immediately. Now, this was still kind of the baby steps. We didn't have Twitter, this mass broadcast communication at that time, but it was really exciting. Like, we can't imagine what a breakthrough this was. And so Google caught that wave of enthusiasm. And that was what the original social media platforms aimed to do, to bring people together, to accelerate the revolution that this internet age was supposed to bring, not isolating these echo chambers or controlling what people think and say, but rather expanding minds and the freedom and free exchange of ideas and thoughts. And that was an absolutely laudable objective, one that has turned radically to a dystopian nightmare. And I want to discuss the true scale of where this all leads, okay? If you have a small cabal of people deciding what is right and wrong think, then you absolutely eviscerate the whole liberal idea. I mean, John Stuart Mill, kind of founder of liberalist thought, said it is absolutely in no one's right for the majority to silence a minority any more than it would be for that minority were within their power to silence the majority. And the reason for that is because if you have free expression, free exchange of ideas, then what you have is other people jumping in either to agree or criticize, and you therefore have the opportunity to improve if you're in error, or to progress the society moving forward if your thought is actually captures some element of truth. Now, this is something that progressives themselves should, if they were thinking clearly, appreciate, because every single progressive policy idea, every single social initiative, whether it's dramatic like ending slavery worldwide, or social change like same-sex marriage and gay relationships, all of these ideas started as minority viewpoints. They started as a small group of people who had a radical idea that dramatically changed the way in which we think and value and address different issues. And what would happen is they would get a high degree of scorn and criticism, even disgust, from various segments of the community. But over time, because there was a free and fair exchange of ideas, that marketplace would wash out, and the truth of what they were saying, in, say, the case of slavery, the intrinsic human value, the total hypocrisy of saying that there is, everyone has inalienable rights, but only if you're of a particular race, then that tends to take hold, and you build up a momentum and you affect positive change. But what happens with these tech giants is, by completely isolating views that they deem to be so-called dangerous ideas, absolutely in the purview of their own discretion, then you have what is a tyrannical dystopian nightmare, something that we would associate with communist dictatorships like China, but not liberal democracies like the United States, Australia, Britain, Canada, New Zealand, and so on. And if you have, there's other issues around this as well. The platforms themselves, and I did a whole video on this when we were talking about some of the information that they had suppressed, but the platforms themselves have what they call platform protections, okay? And that is that if you are a telephone company and someone uses your carrier service as a telephone company to organize a terrorist plot, right? They call their friends, they organize a crime, and they carry out that crime through their telephone communications. Nobody goes to the telephone company and says, oh, you should have done more to stop this. They were using your service. That's because everybody has access to the telecommunications network as a fundamental right that allows people to exchange their ideas. It's absolutely no different when it comes to these major tech platforms. In fact, more so, because they are now the public square. If you want to express your political viewpoint, you get on social media, you get on Twitter, you get on Facebook, you get on YouTube, and you talk about these issues and express yourself supposedly freely. So what they say is, look, you can't sue us for what people say on these social media platforms because we are a carrier service. We're a public square. We provide the forum, and it's up to individuals to have the rights and the responsibilities that are associated with what they say. A good example would be like in a bookstore, right? If you go to a bookstore and there is a book that is filled with errors and it creates all kinds of defamation or it's plagiaristic, and you buy that book and you kind of realize that, well, you can't sue the bookstore for selling you the book, right? you have to go to the publisher and say, you should not have published this because that was your editorial discretion. And that's critically important when it comes to what's happened with Trump. By deplatforming Trump, by editorializing his tweets, or in Twitter's case, blocking him for 12 hours, what they've done is they've exercised personal discretion over the head of the American government in terms of their editorial power. And the only groups that have that right are publishers. So the New York Times can decide whether or not to publish or not publish something that Trump says, right? Trump doesn't have an absolute right to go to the editor of the New York Times and says, I've written an op-ed, you have to publish it. No, it's up to the editors over their business. But equally, the New York Times is responsible and culpable for anything they do publish, right? So, and so what the social media platforms have done is they have assumed all the rights that come along with being a publisher, editorial control, even over the most powerful democratically elected people on earth, right? While avoiding and shirking all of the obligations and responsibilities that come with that, such as being responsible for the stuff that is published on their network. They say, oh no, that's individuals, that's individual control. And if you want to sue someone, you have to go to those individuals and blame them for that content. So it's a totally outrageous legal double standard, aside from everything else. But more than that, the sheer thought that this is something that people think is acceptable will lead to, but very likely, I mean, at least civil unrest and quite likely civil war in the United States. There is no way you can have a cabal of a small group of people in Silicon Valley deciding unilaterally in their own minds what is the appropriate thing to say. Now, when I was listening to the radio on what had happened with Donald Trump, I think it was the BBC World Service, the British Broadcasting Corporation, and there was only one perspective put forward on this. This is a public broadcaster, which was, the two perspectives was, yes, this is a great thing that what Facebook has done because Trump is such a radical danger to the Western liberal tradition, or they should have acted sooner and gone further. Those were the two perspectives, right? There was no perspective broadcast to say, actually, this is a genuine threat to our fundamental personhood, to be able to freely express ideas and improve our society among different groups. There was no one who said that, or anyone say, hey, what does it mean if small groups of people who are tech companies get to silence the most powerful democratic heads of state on earth? What does that mean for the rest of us? What impact will that have on free expression and freedom of speech? No one was asking these questions. So there is a kind of a group of elites who seem to think that this is okay. Now, let me give you some real life things of where this sort of thing will lead. If people say, for example, Twitter, Facebook, these are just private companies. They have a right to do what they want. They don't have an obligation to platform people. Well, that also means that if you have a Visa or a MasterCard, right, those financial companies aren't obligated to process your transactions based on your political views. Whether or not a bank forecloses on your home or not could be determined by what you think of various social issues. This is an absolute nightmare where laws themselves, which don't exist in nature, laws are just a series of ideas that we all agree on, that say, look, they're not going to apply equally to everybody. What determines whether or not you are able to access services, whether it's financial, transport, insurance, that depends on your personal expression. And this is not just theoretical. So the other day, Josh Hawley, who I talk about a bit, is one of the strongest, toughest voices on China in the American Senate. His book Contract was cancelled by Simon & Schuster the other day, which was a book on the threat of tech censorship. I think it was called the new tech master, something like that, something that was talking about dystopia, the very subject that I'm talking about now. His book contract was cancelled the other day because he was representing his constituents in a way, because voicing opinions on the floor of the Senate that the publisher did not like. So that's just one example, but this goes across the board. There's another woman, I think her name is Laura Towler or something. She is an ethno-nationalist, right? She has views that I certainly wouldn't agree with. But in the UK, well, her bank accounts were all frozen. Right? She's not someone who calls for violence. She's not a terrorist or anything. This isn't terrorist financing. She's just someone that is really anti-immigration, believes that the indigenous people of the UK are not, getting access to the same services and stuff, things that I wouldn't promote or agree. But she has a right as an individual to express her opinion without being persecuted through the freezing of her financial accounts. Okay, and now I understand it if someone is calling for direct violence and terrorism and all that sort of stuff, but she doesn't do that. She's just expressing a political view, and the way to combat that view isn't to shut her down by making her absolutely unable to buy a loaf of bread using this cashless society that we are now in the pandemic era, is to challenge her bad ideas where they exist with good ideas and incorporate the concerns that she has that are legitimate in improved public policy. That is the way in which the Western liberal democratic societies are supposed to work. And now I said in my very first video, the Hannah Arendt test. Okay, and if you want to see where this would lead today, Hannah Arendt, in her Banality of Evil, she covered the Eichmann trials. Eichmann, of course, was the man responsible for running the trains during the Holocaust. And through her coverage, published in the New Yorker, back when that magazine was a really profound publication, not the rag it is today, she, as a philosopher and political theorist, exposed tremendous insights about human nature and how evil can happen without anyone being a Mephistopheles with, mustache twirling villain. No, these are just people doing their job, focused on their individual task, not really considering the moral implications of their actions, and not meaning that public officials have avoided and shirked their moral responsibility. Now, because people thought she was apologizing for Eichmann, which absolutely was not, right? She was very clear that his problem was his failure to act as a moral agent. But they thought that because she was, saying, look, he's not impressive, he's not a Mephistopheles, he wasn't trying to, obliterate the Jewish people, that they thought that was an apology. And so they had thousands of complaints raining in against her. If the New Yorker was Facebook or Twitter or something like that today, her insights would never have been published. Or if they were published, they would have been immediately pulled with thousands of hashtags trending about how she's a Nazi, right? And yet her insights have dramatically altered how we perceive public sector accountability around the world, right? One of the main reasons that combats corruption in public agencies is her understanding of human nature. And if we didn't have those insights, the world would be a far worse place. People have to have the right to say controversial, even offensive things if we're to live in a proper modern state where we can actualize our true human selves. The only outcome of tech giants suppressing freedom of speech in this way is to lead us to a tyrannical dystopian nightmare, which is exactly what Hannah Arendt herself discussed in The Origins of Totalitarianism, her magnum opus. So I just wanted to say that this is new territory. When people, and I want to stress this as well, just before I wrap up, that they are doing what they think is right without much awareness of the true implications of their actions. And as a consequence of that, it's not that they're bad people, right? Eichmann certainly was. I'm not comparing the two. But they're not bad people in the sense that they think what they're doing is right. And when you deplatform the president, the next time that happens, it becomes so much easier. It becomes so much easier to move along the spectrum, to go, okay, well, I think this is a little bit dangerous or this is unseemly, to deplatform them in that sense. And it's the same is true when we talk about public sector corruption, right? Like if you take a bribe as a public official, you may not be a terrible person. You may have a massive addiction you're trying to feed. You may be in a desperate situation in your own life. Very few people enter the public service with that kind of moral weakness, right? But once you've done it once, it becomes so much easier to do it again, and it eventually becomes normal, and then the rest of the world receives the consequences of that actions, as we will in this case, but on a vastly greater scale. Anyway, I'll wrap it up there. Thank you very much if you got this far to listening to this. It's a very important subject. Certainly we'll address it again. Leave your thoughts and comments on this down below, but be mindful of the fact that we are on a platform that will censor things. And if you found value in this, like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.